Okay, good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to our conversation, our men's mental health conversation. Bro, you're good. As many of you know, that the month of June is recognized as Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and so we found that it was very fitting for us to bring the month's observance to a close by having this conversation. The objective of this conversation is to stimulate dialogue along the lines of mental health, specifically with regards to men. We know that men represent a population in our society that is faced with a lot of mental health challenges, owing a lot to the fact that our sociocultural norms don't necessarily allow for open expression of men's emotions, etc., and stuff, and posing a challenge for young men to get through different challenges. And so we think that if it is that we're able to stimulate discourse and create a platform whereby persons are able to share and learn from each other's experiences, then that will be beneficial to us all. This evening, you have myself as Dr. Brewster from RN Medical and Critical Care Comprehensive Center. And joining us this evening will be two distinguished gentlemen, one by the name of Dr. Stephan Neill and the other by the name of Mr. Garth Williams. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves once they come on, because I'm sure they don't really need any introduction. So without further ado, we welcome Brother Garth and we welcome Brother Stephan Neill. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Dr. Brewster. Hey, Garth, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Evening, Stefan. Evening, Brewster. It's
Wonderful.
good. It's good to be here. I noted in your introduction just now that you pointed to closing out the month of men's mental health month with a session such as this, an essential session, I believe, because mental health month doesn't get the kind of, well, it's recent, relatively recent, and it doesn't get the kind of spotlight that other observations would receive. So it's good that we're doing our little part to help boost that. It's my hope, and I'm sure that through this discussion over the next hour or thereabouts, that those who watch will be able to take notes and learn, and share, and that we can repeat this activity, not just in June, but at other points during the year, so that the consideration around men and their mental health can not just be limited to the 30 days of June, which, by the way, is the best month, but it's not limited to the 30 days of June, but it can be something that is consistent year round.
And
Absolutely.
Gareth, just to echo on some of your statements there, you're absolutely right. The month of men's health is really a month that we ought to drill it into our men out there, that we're here for you, and this is your time to really be heard. This is your time to have your questions answered. This is your time to seek solace and to understand that there are avenues for you, and to understand what it is that you may be feeling that should trigger you to seek and start walking down those avenues. It's very important. We have, and I'm not bashing the woman, we have many months out there. We have cervical cancer month, we have breast cancer month, we have women's month, we have women's health month, and so on. But these things tend to be marketed very heavily, and you barely ever hear about the men, what's happening with the men. And that's why, men, it almost drives home the point that uh, men, we are already very internalizing beings. And when it is that we don't hear it marketed, we don't hear it out there, put out there properly, that there is avenues for us, and there are um, times for us to speak up and times for us to be heard. It's very important, and that's what the whole genesis of this project here is about. And I'm really happy to be a part of it with you all. And let's see how best we can reach out and guide those men out there, especially those who might need it and don't know yet.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stefan. So, as you can see, guys, we have a good team of men who are ready and eager to speak this evening. So I'm going to invite you to share the live, share the YouTube link, share the Facebook link. Let others know that this is going on, especially to the young men you may know who might be struggling with whatever their situation they may be going through. So, guys, this is a chill vibe. We're trying to ensure that it is not, so didactic or anything, but definitely as interactive as possible, so that persons can very much can get the message that we want to share. And so, as we progress, I'm going to ask Dr. Neill if you could just enlighten us a bit on some common mental health issues that men face, specifically men in the Jamaican context, young men, aspiring men, striving men. What are the challenges that, from your experience, in your practice and even your personal experience, you could say that, men experience?
Thanks, Brewster. In my own experience, what I'd say is the silent killer in men, in this case, in the context of mental health, is what I'd say is anxiety and depression. Good. It's important to note that anxiety and depression really are spectrum issues. So you have 0, you have 100, you can be anywhere in between. However, what I find in practice and what I find out there socializing with the young men in our communities is that they will be experiencing these symptoms. These symptoms will start to affect them. However, it's only ever when these symptoms and these issues start to affect their productivity, their ability to put bread on the table, their ability to perform. And we're not holding any words here. I mean, perform sexually. And when it is that it starts to affect their overall, what I'd say, their productivity in life, that is when they tend to present to us, and that is when they start to share. We also find a lot of the times that you might have a man like this who is starting to have symptoms that are starting to affect their productivity in life in whatever way it is. They come and they get a little bit of help, but then they really pull back. A lot of it has to do with ego. A lot of it has to do with being shy. A lot of it has to do with just acculturation over the years, where you find that the man in the family or the young boy growing up is always told, hey boy, enough for ball, what you cry for, all these things. And that kind of drills it into us as men that we're to be self-sufficient all the time, and we're not to be relying on anybody, and we're not to share anything that seems anything less than perfect with anybody. And that's a problem. And so really what we need to get to the bottom of is that we ought to know that there are avenues to share and there are avenues to be heard. And we're not to wait until things are, so severe that it affects your productivity that you wait on that point to come and seek attention.
But question: do you think that there's any particular predisposition that men has to mental challenges over our female counterparts?
Well, the first one that comes to mind, particularly in our Jamaican context, would be smoking. Smoking, especially of marijuana, will set up someone for presentation in them of certain psychiatric illnesses. A lot of these illnesses tend to be triggered by marijuana smoking. And there's also a strong genetic predisposition as well. So if it is that you have a family member, first degree meaning your immediate family, your brother, your sister, your mother, second degree meaning your cousins, your aunts, if they have any mental health issues, predating you, outside of you, what's going to happen is that you have it, you're almost hardwired based on your genetics. And then when you go, that's one risk factor. And then when you go and smoke on top of it, you're compounding risks. That is particularly one of the things that I think is a trigger to some of the men, maybe a good percentage of the men in our population.
Right, and I think in addition to that, given just how we're socialized, it does not necessarily create an environment where many men feel that it's safe enough to express themselves, express, talk about the vulnerabilities, talk about the challenges that they go through. And so what we find is that a lot of us, we have it bottled up inside. We don't have an avenue to express it. And just like, what they say, what pressure bust pipe, right? And one day it's just too much. And so we need spaces like these where we're able to have these conversations. We need to have persons in our lives that we can trust, that we can confide in, and have these conversations to ensure that we release those pressures so that they come out in a controlled way rather than in an impulsive, uncontrolled way. I'm going to bring in Garth to tell us a little about what your ideas are with regards to stigma, and barriers to opening up, where men are concerned in terms of talking about their challenges, their emotional state, etc. And stuff. What are the challenges that the Jamaican man particularly faces at this time?
Um, okay, thanks for that question and that invitation to kind of speak there. Stefan touched on a little bit of it a while ago in the early part of his presentation, where he spoke to um, when you're younger, you're being told, yo, man up, you have to stay strong. Cultural conditioning. So from childhood, we're often told things like that. Stop crying, or you're soft. And that's not cool, because what happens is that by the time we become adults, we're trained to suppress and to compress and compartmentalize your issues, your the things that make you vulnerable, the challenges that you're having, and so on, and to not ask for help. And that's where a chief part of the problem is, in the not asking for help, right? It is important that we learn to ask for help. The other thing is, in asking for help, there is the fear of judgment, right? And that's something that really needs careful attention, right? Because we fear being judged, whether by our peers or partners or the society at large. So on the one hand, sometimes they hear, oh, you need to be expressive. But at the same time, if you express yourself, then you fear, there's a risk, not so much a fear, but there's a risk of being judged. And the fear alone of being judged can sometimes stop a man more specifically, from opening up, especially when they're going through something serious, there's still a bit of a stigma around seeking professional intervention, professional support. We're talking about a psychologist, a counselor. We're talking about a psychiatrist on the further end of it. Them think they're for mad people. I'm mad, yeah, I'm mad out. People say them kind of things, and it's very insensitive, actually. And we don't think enough around how that can impact people. So that's another thing. Safe spaces, right? I just mentioned professional intervention. I just mentioned like a counselor, psychologist, and so on. Even discussions like these, programs on the air, and so on. Um, uh, Trust is a big thing. Can I trust, right? Can I trust who I'm speaking to? If I say this to my mother, my father, a relative, a close friend, a confidant, um, am I gonna hear it back? Will they weaponize it in the future? So those are some of the things that we have to be thinking about. Um, Personal reflection. I mean, on a come to think about it, yeah, even in my own journey as a father, as a professional, um, I've had to learn how to, or unlearn, pardon me, um, keeping silent. I've had over time to really learn to trust, for example, my wife, who incidentally was my bestie before we got married.
Wow.
And people might be listening now and saying, she was your bestie, or is she still your bestie? The relationship between me and my wife has evolved. So while we were besties, yeah, it included a lot of things. Now we are both parents, raising a family. We are married to each other, so there are other considerations, and there's some things I don't want to burden her with. I'd much rather speak to a professional about. And yes, I wouldn't say heavily, but I rely on professional intervention to help me get by. The last thing I want to say is, I want to remind people, or tell the audience, and those who will pick this up after the broadcast, that Jamaican men, I don't think Jamaican men are usually emotionally unavailable, right? You will hear this thing where, oh, yeah, them they over one part and them have a girl, but them they really they're there emotionally are available. It's just that we've been taught over time that showing emotion is weakness. It needs to change. And I think for our next generation, for us raising our kids now, we have to get them into a space, get our boys into a space where they are able to express themselves, be vulnerable, but also recognize that in doing that, it is a sign of strength and not a sign of weakness.
Indeed, and I will add to that by saying that first, I mean, I asked the question about the Jamaican man because our audience is largely Jamaican, but as a Caribbean man, I'm from Dominica, and my experience is pretty much the same. And I reckon that it is a similar experience throughout the Caribbean, in terms of how it is that our young men are socialized, and we can always point back in these different contexts, although they have slight cultural differences, etc. The similarities in terms of not just the impetus for these challenges, but the outcome. The increased crime rate, the increased level of absentee fathers, etc. And so it definitely is something that we need to cauterize as a Caribbean region. I'll bring in Stephan to find out from him. Stephan, is that your experience as a young man growing up in Jamaica? Was that your experience as well?
That's if it's my experience. That's where. Give me the question again. Sorry.
So the question really can you relate to that experience of not feeling that as a man that you're able to express yourself,
Yes.
freely, or that there is the idea that or rather your emotional health, etc., is ignored in most situations, in favor of every other cultural norm.
Yes. Yes. I have had that experience, and that experience is rampant out there actually, especially in a society where you find that in the professional realm, especially, women are taking over. The numbers of in the corporate world, the demographic of women compared to men, the women are really really outpowering in terms of the numbers, in terms of the demographics. And what that causes now is that it adds extra pressure to the man and causes a compounding of that same problem where we feel like we need to deal with everything ourselves and not really rely on anybody else. And I tell you a story, or I give you an anecdote actually. You find that, for instance, women will be a lot more likely most of the time to share what it is that's happening with them, with their peers, with their other girlfriends, and so on, with their sisters, with their mothers, and with their male counterparts. The man, and Garth touched on it, the man is gonna be way less likely to let in that bit of emotion, to show that vulnerability. And as a result, you find that although, and even before I move on, a part of it, there's reason behind it. A lot of us in our mind is saying that, hey, if I tell Garth what's happening with me in terms of my how I'm uncomfortable in certain aspects of my relationship with my girlfriend, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, Garth going to tell somebody else, Garth might use this against me. And because of that, it's almost as if in order to preserve ourselves and in order to ensure that we present ourselves as the perfect being, the perfect man, we're not going to share certain things that we feel are less than perfect. Anything less than perfect is a real deterrent for us. And as a result of that, it's rampant throughout society. What we find is that the man will be going through things, the average Jamaican man will be going through particular things. Some of them are, again, it's a spectrum, but some of them can be very grievous things, some serious matters going on. And you keep that within yourself to the point where you said it, Brewster, pressure bust pipe. So
Indeed.
as a result of that, what's going to happen is that you compound all of this stress, you're not sharing any of it, you're trying to deal with it yourself. You might not be dealing with it the best possible way. And as a result, the situation festers. Yeah, but
Right.
it's all, if you're gonna lighten it to a wound, you have a wound there, the wound is getting worse, it's festering, and you're not, you're getting to the bottom of what's happening. You're putting a band-aid on top of it, but you're not curing the underlying problem. And as a result, what's happening is that that wound is gonna break away. You're gonna end up with a big problem. You understand? And that big problem sometimes can lead to the same man becoming suicidal, becoming homicidal. This same man is gonna go, we hear it all the time in the news. There was a policeman recently who shot and killed his significant other, and then tried to commit suicide afterwards. And stories like that are a dime a dozen out there. Really, what's happening in the background, if you really get into it and you ask the question, what is it that led to this? What is it that caused this man to feel like this was his result? This is what he had to do. It's really because he bottled everything up to that point,
Right.
and he didn't know what to do with himself.
But sometimes, Stefan, the signs are not obvious. Or sometimes, it seems sudden to the average person, but it's because, they may not know better to know what to look out for. So what are some of the things that we can advise the general population? So this is not just talking to men, it's talking to everyone. What are some of the signs that we should look out for to know that something is off, with the mental health of our brothers?
So we talk about anhedonia. What that is really is where you start to lose interest in things that would once upon a time drive you. You start to lose interest in doing things that you love, participating in activities that you enjoy, socializing. You start to lose interest in your own physical upkeep. Some people will, you know, today you decide that, hey, I am feel so lazy, and it's a new feeling. You feel so lazy that after a long day, after a grueling day, you don't really want to eat. You decide that you're gonna skip your meal, or you decide that you're not going to bother bathe today because you just can't bother. You start to feel like you're not really doing those things that you ought to do or used to do, that used to bring you joy or used to keep you maintained, right? You can also feel this sense of being closed off, where you share a particular problem, and most of us are going to do something like this. We share a piece and we wait to see what the interaction is. So we give you a bit of what it is on our mind, and we see, we bounce it off for you. We see how you respond. We see what you come at me next with. And then that is now gauging to see how judgmental the other person is going to be. And then as a result of that, you end up in a situation where you almost start to close off yourself. You feel like you'd love to have an avenue to share, but you don't know where that avenue is. You can't identify the road. You don't know. You end up now kind of running in circles. Those are two things that I'd say are clear cut signs that something serious is happening, and you really ought to try and seek some help. The help doesn't necessarily always have to be a professional medical person. Doesn't necessarily have to be a priest. It can be your closest friend. It can be your significant other, can be a brother, but you need to, if it is that you start to feel that way, it's very important that you start to seek out what those avenues could be and utilize them.
Absolutely. And another thing too is that sometimes signs of depression and anxiety, and just other mental health challenges, sometimes they come with a completely different sort of presentation. So sometimes instead of being overly sad, you have being overly happy, or having desires for thrilling activities that as in just more than normal and stuff. But what I always tell my patients, and I always share when I speak with other persons, is that when in doubt, just reach out. Right? When in doubt, reach out.
That's a
You
good one.
haven't heard from someone for a while, reach out. You're seeing them, but you notice a subtle behavior, something that is different from the ordinary. Reach out. Sometimes all we need is to know that someone cares enough to ask a question, right? And in this in 2025, we have we have technology that makes it much easier for us to reach out. Just a text message, a WhatsApp call, an email. or sending a reel, just even for me. I mean, I'm a very busy person, as with most, I would want to think all of us on here are very busy. And so I'm not always able to have long conversations and that kind of stuff. But I have friends who send me reels every day. And every now and then I send back a reel. And, while we're not having any long conversation, just the little laughter, just sending back the smiley emoji, and that kind of stuff. You can use things like reels as a proxy for people's mental health. If it is that they're sending you all the time, they would send you happy, joyful stuff, and all of a sudden they're sending you depressing stuff. When in doubt, reach out. I'm going to
Right.
ask Garth to share with us, how is it that you think we can utilize social media, to reach out better. How can we use platforms like social media to start healthier conversation, among men? How can we use social media better to reach out and to reach men where they are, on the matter of mental health?
That's a good point you're raising about leveraging avenues like social media to provide support for men's mental health. But before I speak to the technology, let us also recognize that there are lots of men who are struggling who don't necessarily have that type of digital access. That's something for us to always remember, that we have men who, despite having the digital access, aren't necessarily digitally savvy, or they aren't necessarily tech savvy. And while you and I, Stefan, other people, lots of other people, especially children, younger kids, I should say, are almost I'll call us digital natives in a way, especially the kids. There is a generation of men who aren't so immersed and au fait and regularly using technology. So, with that point made, it starts with the help that we can provide for each other, the equivalent of a meme online in real life is sharing even just a joke or a light moment with your brethren. It starts with things like you mentioned. When in doubt, reach out. You notice something different about your brethren, talk to him, ask him a question. Even if him not want, fasting and business too much. Our Jamaican thing, people are fasting their business and inquisitive, right? But still reach out and just make him know, say, so me see something a little bit different about you, and I just want to know if you're all right. And if you don't all right, well, let me talk about it. And if you don't want to talk to me about it, then let me talk to somebody else about it. Let me recommend a counselor. You understand me? A pastor. You can start with a pastor. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of using religious counseling like that, because oftentimes I find that those counselors tend to kind of channel you towards the Bible. Um, and that's fine if you want to do that, and that's fine if counselors do that. But I just think sometimes people may not necessarily be so religiously inclined, speaking about Christianity here, and they may seek a broader perspective and not so much a Bible-centric perspective. But I'm going a little bit off topic. So it starts with knowing your brethren and your relative, your friend, your colleague, and just as a man, reaching out and saying, yo, and also sharing lighter moments as well. But sometimes we're wholly pent up, and if you can just bust a one laugh, you find something hilarious, you find something funny, just a light thing to just kind of ease a little bit of pressure, ease a little bit of tension. Um, Now, where social media is concerned, your regular platforms, your Instagram, your TikTok, your YouTube, your Facebook, right? YouTube, not so much social media, but it's a bit of a hybrid, right? Um, we see people sharing a lot of positive content, real stories of resilience, of transformation, of journeys that people have been on, taking them from one extreme to a better place. People sharing mental health tips, people um, doing that kind of thing is becoming much more normal now. I would say take everything with a grain of salt, because sometimes the advice you're being given, if you internalize it, it may just not be right for you, right? So be careful, but I will applaud all of those content creators who are sharing things that are helpful, sharing content that is leading people in the right, healthy direction, leading men in the right and healthy direction to protect and improve and enhance and sustain and maintain good mental health. Positive peer influences, I think I kind of touched on it earlier, where when as men, if we see other men, right, who are openly talking about anxiety and depression and that kind of thing, it helps to break the stigma. So it's important that we use our social media platforms in such a way as to improve and support others. What it says is that it says that you are not alone. I am not alone. There is a community. There is that feeling that there are others who are going through the same issues and struggles as I am, and that helps a lot. The truth is, social media gets a bit of a bad rap a lot of times. People talk about the negatives of social media, but the truth is, social media content outside of what is being produced through AI accounts, and it's not like the AI accounts just produce themselves, right? It's done within particular parameters that they're given, right? But for those of us who knock AI accounts, sorry, not AI accounts, social media overall. Remember, social media is about the people. So even when you talk about the society, right, it's the people that comprise the society, right? It's people that are comprising social media. Are we? It's me. It's you. It's the lady. It's the gentleman. It's everybody, right? So in that instance, you're going to find that there are lots of challenges and negative things that are placed out there, but it is our responsibility to share those things that can uplift. So with that said, I'm going to encourage and call on all content creators out there, influencers, you name it, to include positive mental health notes, positive mental health content in your content types. Share those things. I do some videos from time to time, right from my living room. I'm in my office now, but sometimes from my living room. And I just put these things out there. And sometimes I end up in the supermarket and in other spaces, and a stranger will say to me, say me know your face. Me see your face on one something on one TikTok, something. Me see your face on one Instagram, something. Right? And me not lie you. It really encouraged me. I mean, share it with my mother. Another friend of mine, she did not know that her mom subscribes to my TikTok. Right? And she was saying, yo, whenever I know you started them video here. And I said, oh yeah, how you know? She's like, my mother in a France. Her mom is living in France. Right? Then my mother in a France, and as she sent me and asked me if me know the Jamaican youth here because she come across this video. I provided help. Hey, you never know where your message will go and who it may inspire, even if it's one person. So we all should aspire to include some of those positive, uplifting messages whenever we get a chance, because it can go a far way.
Absolutely, and I'm going to ask you later, Garth, to share your social so that persons on our platform this evening can get to see those videos, because I can attest to the fact that they are definitely uplifting nuggets of wisdom that can help to brighten your day and to broaden your perspective. Gentlemen, as we and time is running so fast, and I think we're having a very good time. I'm going to share with us my personal experience, or one of my experiences with how I found that accepting help was beneficial. And so I'm going to ask that even as I speak, that both of you could think of any experience that you would be willing to share with us in terms of how it is you may have overcome some sort of mental health challenge. Because one of the things is that when we mention mental health, most times we tend to think more along the lines of schizophrenia and psychosis and these things, and not necessarily consider, depression, even mild depression, as something that we should consider when we talk about mental health. I remember when I was in medical school, I went through a lot of challenges in terms of financing my education, and obviously medical school itself is heavy with a lot of work. But to add to that, the responsibility of having to find 4.3 million Jamaican dollars a year was a lot, and I pushed through. I sold things, I had concerts, and I hustled my way through. But somewhere along my fourth year, I started noticing that I was acting differently. I started noticing that while I would ordinarily be someone who is very organized, I plan my days at least 7 days in advance. My days were seeming less organized. They were seeming less planned. I had less desire to do the things that I would normally do. I kept doing them because I had to do them in order to survive. But just the pleasure from them was becoming less. And really and truly, it was two things that helped to save me. One were the people around me. My friends noticed that things were different. They noticed that I was sleeping more. They noticed that I was going out less. They noticed that I was just not the same. And so I can point to at least three of them on different occasions who would have reached out and said to me that, yo, Devon, what's happening? What's going on? Do you need help? And one of them in particular encouraged me to see a counselor. And I started doing counseling sessions, and it absolutely helped. One of the things that people don't realize is that counseling is not meant to fix you. Counseling is meant to help you fix yourself, right? By asking the right questions, by creating a space where you can speak and hear your own self. I don't know, everybody's experience is different, but my experience with counseling is that when I sit and I speak, all the answers to my questions come right out of my mouth. I just need that sort of guidance in terms of getting the right answers. And so what it has caused me to do now is I am a big proposer of counseling. I think everyone should have a psychologist. I think everyone should take a counseling session every now and then, top up every few months and so, because sometimes it's only in conversation that you have that you get to realize that yeah, I need to work on this, or I need to work on that. But overall, having the right set of people around me was very important in terms of helping me to take that first step, which I never considered before, because I always thought that that's for mad people, or that's for people who are extremely depressed. People who you're just trying to try something because things get so bad. But I think it's important for us to maintain just a steady level of acceptable mental health. You have a conversation with a counselor every now and then. So I'm going to invite Stephan to share with us any experience that you would want to share with us in terms of how you may have overcome some mental health challenge or help someone to do the same.
Thanks, Brewster. And really, really amazing story. It's inspiring. My story is actually gonna echo a little bit on what you just mentioned, and a bit of what Garth mentioned previously. And what it's gonna be based around is choosing the right person to speak to. So I'm gonna premise the story a little bit by telling you that we mentioned before that it's important that when it is that you start to feel that way, you reach out. But who do you reach out to? Sometimes we assume that the counselor is who we should reach out to. We've been through that. However, sometimes we think that we should be able to reach out to our significant other. We should be able to reach out to probably some member of our family, but it's not necessarily so straightforward. What I want to say is that choosing the person, or choosing the right avenue in this case, to keep it consistent with the theme, choosing the right avenue in this case is very important. And my story is really about, it's a relationship story, okay? Now, and it caused me to learn that point very, very, very viscerally. So what happened is that I've found sometimes that I might not be getting through to my significant other the way that I would expect to. It's not being received the way that I would hope it to be received, whatever it is I'm trying to communicate, or whatever it is I'm trying to intimate, and so on. And it used to really get on my nerves. It used to really trigger some bit of anxiety, I'd say, some bit of feeling overwhelmed as if I'm not getting anywhere with this particular problem. Um, but then I found that speaking or having, let me get my thoughts right, speaking to someone else about the problem that was happening with me and my significant other caused a serious breakthrough. And all it all it really took was to hear the same exact words expressed from a different person. Why? Because the person I was dealing with this whole time is almost as if you set up yourself against whatever that person has to say to you. No matter how good or how righteous or how accurate that person is speaking to you, it's not gonna get through to you because you already sort of bias against the person. But if you hear it from somebody else, sometimes it's the exact same stuff, paraphrase, the exact same stuff, paraphrase. It hits you in such a way that it's like an epiphany, and you're wondering, but this is not new. I didn't. It's nothing. It's not nuanced to me. Why is it that it feels so different? You need to be able. You need to realize sometimes that reaching out to that particularly right person, sometimes somebody just completely out of the box, somebody who don't have nothing to do with the situation that's happening here at all. That's really all you need. Um, it was mentioned that some people are a little bit uncomfortable going to the pastor. Some people are a little bit uncomfortable going to the psychiatrist. Sometimes it's just your friend around the corner you need, to tell you exactly what it is that you already know, but you need to hear it through the mouth of somebody who is brand new, somebody who's fresh to the situation. And what I found in my particular case is that when I spoke to this person about my relationship issue, it brought up the whole scenario of love languages, and that you need to be able to communicate to someone in a way that means something to them, not necessarily something to you. The same message that you tell yourself, it might not work out speaking to somebody else. But if you swing it in a way that speaks to them based on how they were raised, based on their acculturation, to use Garth's um, context, uh, based on their own experiences. If you're able to pull on some of those things, then that is really what you need now. And that's how you're going to get to somebody. That's how you're going to break the ice, for want of a better phrase. Just being able to find that right person,
Indeed,
that's
and
what I want.
that's why I think it's important that you're well. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your personal example, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because it helps us to, or it reminds us that we should touch on the aspect of intimate partner violence, because intimate partner violence is one of the results of difficulty with persons in terms of expressing their feelings and communications in relationships. And we know that in when we look at the statistics for intimate partner violence, disproportionately, oftentimes the men are the aggressors. At least in the documentations, what actually gets to law
Yes.
enforcement. And so what it tells us is that as men, in the context of relationships, we have to do some work when it comes perspective of how we communicate, how we speak, how it is that we share our feelings, how it is that we communicate, our disagreements, and similarly how it is that we receive whatever is meted out to us, because the whole idea of love languages and so forth, very much important, and I'm sure would form basis for a lovely discussion going forward in the future. I'm going to invite Garth to share with us the experience that I think that can be beneficial to our discussion this evening.
Sure. I want to pick up from where Stefan left off just now, in that on the point about sometimes it's not you're a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a counselor, and sometimes it's just a friend around the corner. Um, and building on that to say it is important that you have a good, solid, productive, progressive set of friends. You need friends who can help you to, as we always say, iron sharpen iron. So you need friends who will sharpen you. You need friends who will not just be an echo chamber for some of the negative ideas or thoughts that may come to your mind, but friends who will say, hold on a second, nah, bro, rethink this, you know? Um, you need to be that friend in the group who can say, hold on a second, brother, that not sounds so 100. Let's rethink it. Let's look at it from another angle, provide a broader perspective. Because if you have friends who only going, as I say, be an echo chamber, or your friends who only see things like a eye for an eye type of vibe, yeah, you gotta be careful of that. But indeed, Stefan, you are correct. And on that note, while I won't share a personal experience in terms of me having to rely on, which I mentioned earlier, that I do rely on occasionally, a professional, a psychologist in particular. The benefit that I've gotten from that professional intervention is something that I pass on. So I have I wow, I can't quote now, but there's a particular psychologist too, who once I message them, their question is, who is it now, Garth? Because I consistently recommend persons to them and I will sponsor the sessions myself, brethren and sister alike, you know. I think the way the universe has treated me is to be a bit of a helper, right? I've learned a lot of kindness and consideration from my parents in particular, having sat on in the front row, the courtside seats, really, to their demonstrations of kindness and consideration to their fellow man, um, for years when I was a kid growing up. So it's kind of in me, and I've recognized too that it's a lot of the strangers who I'll meet are people who are going through a lot. And so I realized after a while, like, it's probably not just the strangers that you're meeting, Gareth. It's just that, guess what happened? A lot of people out there are going through a lot, and people oftentimes feel very comfortable to talk to me. Um, like I play dominoes, and there's a particular bar that I will go sometimes, and I'll sit down and just play some domino with the man. And I tell you, say, enough time and some strangers sit down on the table, we don't know each other. The only thing we have in common, we love Heineken and we love football, and we just talk about football or whatever, and the conversation goes all over the place. But sometimes, like when we're done, drop a six love or we get a six love. My party, we said to me, say, yo, say, I want to ask you a question, big man. I want to ask you a question. And they will start sharing some struggle, you know. And I have a little bit of counseling training in me, having been a peer counselor for about 2 years while I was studying at university. So I know a few questions to ask to kind of help people share more and go back into their history a bit and realize the context that could have precipitated the situation that they find themselves in. And in so doing, I realize a lot of times that people just need help. And when we realize that people need help, I'm making a recommendation because guess what happened? Sometimes it's such a heavy matter that I personally, or such a complicated matter that I can't deal with it. I'm not in that type of professional capacity. I don't have that professional capacity to take it on myself. Sometimes the burden is so heavy as well. I don't want to take on that weight. I can't because I got my own struggles too, right? But I'll give a listening ear and a good bit of advice, and I leave them with a number or two numbers, and I say, call this number, tell this person that Garth Williams said you should give them a call and proceed from there. I have seen amazing results, not only in my life, but also in the lives of many people who have recommended to professionals to get that mental health support that they need. I've seen it. I can attest to it, right? Um, so for me, to do that, to point them in the direction where they get the help that they need, it's just amazing to see how it unfolds in their lives. Um, and that's where I'm going to leave it for now in terms of a story or stories around how seeking mental health support, seeking professional assistance and intervention can bring about big changes in your life.
Yes, thank you so
Yes.
much. Thank you so much for sharing, Garth. So, folks, we are coming down to the end of our discussion this evening. I think it's been absolutely a productive one. I want to point our attention to the banner below that gives some numbers that you can call if it is that you have you need any help. The suicide crisis line, the Ministry of Health mental health line, as well as the emergency line being 119. Folks, the conversation definitely should not end here. And I know that my fellow brothers here with me this evening, we will be having some discussions in the future with regards to how it is that we can continue the conversation utilizing, all the tools that are at our disposal. But folks, we heard from both Dr. Neill as well as Garth. We heard Garth speak earlier about how he does these videos and stuff that, as I said before, that I can personally attest to, that they are definitely beneficial. We know that Dr. Neill is a general practitioner, and so I'm going to invite them to tell us where it is that we can find them on social media, where we can find you so that we can benefit from your experience. We're going to start with Dr. Neill.
All right. My practice is Critical Care Comprehensive Center. It's located currently at the Matilda's Corner Plaza. That's in Ligani. On social media, it is Critical Care. Well, the website is www.criticalcarejamaica.com. The social media handles are Critical Care Jamaica. All right. That's where you can find me.
Okay. And Brother Garth.
So my social media handle is right there on screen, right down which part? Right there. There we go. Right there. So it's at Garth. I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok. I try from time to time, not time to time, okay, more than occasionally, to be honest, regularly to update my profile, my feed with new videos around inspiration. I'm a communication specialist by trade, as well as I MC and host a lot of events. I'm a professional corporate MC and wedding MC. But my my profiles though, you'll see when you scroll through, you'll see videos where I'm just talking about a variety of issues to help people grow and develop. And that's just kind of my thing, growing with Garth. That's me, you know. So in real life and digitally, that's where I am. And like I said, right there, right here, there we go. Garth. On TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter as well, or X.
Thank you so much. And just before I say where you can find me, I just want to invite those of our viewers to just leave a comment, either letting us know how you felt the conversation went, your feelings about it, or any thoughts that you'd like to share, or even just letting us know where you're listening from so that we can know who's listening. I'm Dr. Brewster. My practice is on Arden Road, 23 Arden Road, Arden Medical. But on a Thursday, you can find me with Dr. Neill at Critical Care Comprehensive Center, just behind the Texaco gas station. And at both places, when you come, you will always meet service with a smile. And one thing that we both have in common, Dr. Neill and myself, is that we are very thorough medical doctors. And very importantly, in line with our conversation this evening about men's mental health, we always ensure that even when we see our patients for whatever medical situation there might be, that we always screen for mental health concerns, which is very much important, right? You should always have your mental health screened as part of your annual checkup, as part of your random pop-up to the doctor, and you can definitely find that at Critical Care Comprehensive Center, and you can also find that at Arden Medical. Folks, we thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we ask you to stay tuned to hear for what other opportunities there will be for us to engage in further discussion along the lines of men's mental health. We invite you to share the video. You can find it on YouTube and Facebook across our various platforms, that others can benefit from the very fruitful discussion that we had this evening. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you all in the future. So without further ado, folks, we just wish everyone a good evening. All right?
All right,
Blessings.
All
guys,
right.
take care.
All right.
Later. Thank you.